All right, Ruth chapter 1, let's call this one Worthy and subtitle it Ruth Clung. Worthy is going to be a title we're going to use for each of these chapters because it is either literally or figuratively going to describe the theme that I think comes through the character of each of the people who really provide kind of a high point for this point in Israel's history. Ruth is going to be described as the daughter-in-law of a woman by the name of Naomi, who is going to move out of her homeland in Israel to Moab to try to carve out a life with her husband and her two sons. She's going to run into hard times, though, because even though those sons are going to find wives, her husband's going to die, then the two sons are going to die, and she's going to be left with her two daughters-in-law who are going to prove faithful to her. Both of them are going to try to go back to Israel with her to make sure that she's not making the journey by herself. But along the way, she's going to make it clear she has no more sons, and even if she had kids right away, her boys would not be old enough to provide for these young ladies back in Israel. And so she's going to encourage them both to leave. But one, Ruth, is going to cling to her, thus the title. And the reason why that's so important is there's a word that comes up over and over again in the Bible called faithfulness. And all my life, I had trouble making a practical application of that concept of faithfulness until I looked at this story and saw the way that that word clung came up over and over again in this period of Israel's history, describing people who were actually loyal to either a friend or to God, clinging to them in their time of need. And that's exactly what Ruth did to Naomi. And the interesting thing about this story is even though when Naomi gets back to Bethlehem, her hometown, she's going to say, don't call me Naomi anymore, call me Mara, because it means bitter. She's going to describe herself as not being bitter so much for her own plight, but for the misery that's been caused to her daughters-in-law. And so this period in this particular story is really characterized by two groups of women who are not looking out for their own interest, but are actually sad for where life has brought the women in their lives, or the friends that are trying to stick by them in a difficult period of time. And so in life, you are fortunate if you found the kinds of friends who cling to you in a way that even in the midst of their own suffering are still trying their best to look out for your best interest. Because that's rare, and I think that's one of the reasons why this story got its own quote-unquote book in the Bible. Because whether it's modern-day America or ancient Israel, it's difficult to find a genuine friend. But it's even that much more rare to find a friend who, like we said, in the midst of their own suffering, is still looking out for your best interest. And so in this first chapter of the book of Ruth, we see in both Naomi and in her daughters-in-law, women who have, in the midst of their own pain, have committed to be faithful to the degree that they will cling to one another to make sure that neither one is alone in this difficult point in their lives. Understanding in the next chapter, we're going to see that Ruth is actually going to do that at great personal cost, and actually she's going to put her safety in jeopardy to make sure that Naomi doesn't have to be alone as she goes back to her hometown, Bethlehem in Israel. And so as we often say, my prayer for you is my prayer for me. To the degree you have either a friend or a family member who, in spite of their own personal suffering, has proven themselves not only willing but capable of coming through for you, praise God for that friend or family member, because there are a lot of people who don't have them. But to the degree you don't have that kind of person in your life, understand the degree to which you have the ability to be that kind of person for someone else. Because in the next chapter, we're going to see the way in which Ruth committing to help bring Naomi out of her period of mourning is actually going to be the doorway out of Ruth's own period of mourning, uncertainty, and doubt.